So yesterday was definitely an intro to virtual production. And let me pull this graphic up. But instead of the traditional, like, okay, we have a script, and then we do the concept art, and then we start actually making the film, and then we do post, and then if you have issues, you don't fix it in pre, you fix it in post. And then you distribute. Whereas now, we have something that looks a bit more like that. And what we're going to talk about, we're staying primarily in the second bubble. We're in the second bubble that says pitch viz. I mean, we would need to do like a 15-week course to get through all the various aspects. But the biggest difference between traditional production and here is if you decide that you want to change something, then it's just like this cyclical. You keep iterating and iterating and iterating until hopefully you lock things down to make sure that things are optimized, and then you shoot. But let me take a moment to just breathe, pray, welcome the Lord into this space. So, Heavenly Father, we welcome you, and we just ask for your information and your words to be shared. Just ask that you would help me to be able to hear wherever you're trying to move, that people would be able to tune in and not be afraid to ask any questions if it's needed, to just be encouraged. And I pray that it really is a launching point for people. And yeah, I just ask for your wisdom, for your peace to be here. In your name we pray. All right. So, just in case anyone is not familiar, the way you used to render things is you would have models. They would start off as gray blobs, and then you would have to, like at least in the animation world, someone has to figure out, okay, what does the texture look like? Is it brick? Is it carpet? Lighting to determine, okay, is it a dark scene or is it a really brightly lit desert scene outside? And then you would click the render button, and then you would wait. And you would wait some more for everything to come in. Whereas what we'll see in this game engine, who's played a video game? Ever? Okay. So when you're roaming around, you're not waiting for render. Everything's already rendered for you, and you can explore that space. So that is what is cool about using a game engine for planning out your stories, is you're not waiting for the pixels to come in. As Steve was mentioning, instead of things taking, what did he say, 7 years of rendering time versus minutes now. Because when you open a game project for the first time, it does all those calculations for you when the first time you open it. But then after you've done that, then you're able to just hit play and explore. And we'll get visuals on that in a moment. But that's probably the biggest difference and most powerful, cool thing about virtual production. So, all right, so we've got our resources page that you can look at. Feel free to look through here on your own, tune out, check out some of these links, ask some questions. It's got a lot of places you could learn more about this online. There's learning communities, training centers. There's a cross-registration learning program where I actually went to 2 different colleges to get a bit more rounded education it's within the state of Georgia. There's documentation if you're already in the scene a bit and you want to learn more. It's like, ooh, here's more places you could do a deeper dive. And then some textbooks that were helpful for me along the way in my journey. And some networking events. And this networking events and meetups, it's a Trello sheet that it's massive. So we can get more people who believe in Jesus in those places and spaces, shifting the atmosphere. And then I'm probably going to spend more time on this pitching page today. So we've got some tools that I used to make what you're going to see today. And then also just ways that I discovered helped me navigate, because in the past I was trying to choose, like, okay, I'm this highly sensitive person. Do I just not watch certain things, but I want to stay relevant? So these tools just help you to maybe be able to find a happy medium where you're still able to watch some of the critically acclaimed advanced films without having to watch more kinds of things than you might want to. So, all right, let's see how our internet is doing. All right. So there's this program that I helped with called Writing in Unreal, and I'm going to pray for it to come in. And the program was a partnership between Tribeca Film Festival and Epic Games, and they took Unreal experts, partnered them, with some aspiring directors, and they are trying to build their team, and they had a couple pages of script for us to visualize. And this is a little bit about that program. You can do it.
Why use Unreal?
Hang on. Let me make sure I'm plugged in so that the people later can catch the beginning. Okay. Try that again. Yeah.
Why use Unreal? From a writer's perspective, it helps answer the question, what if? We can basically go from mind's eye to the camera's eye instantaneously.
The great thing about it.
Just see if I can get a little better quality for you guys. The great thing about Unreal is I'll split the difference. We'll do. So, this is another pitch for going to my website with the info so you can watch this later. Okay. But the awesome reason that we had this program, so the directors that I was paired with, she had some scenes that were very surreal, and there's a specific kind of feeling and mood and effects that were happening that if you were to read that script, or you were to read that script, what you would visualize in your head very, very different than, if you were to compare them. So this put everyone on the same page. Try this again. Prayers appreciated. And if it's low res, I won't mess with it. Okay, I'm going to let it think. I'm going to move on to another section and come back. So, there was a script that I helped previs, and so she was having this dreamlike sequence, and Unreal was perfect for that. And then for today, I ended up, there was a script that my friend wrote for me with me that it was like a coming-of-age story, and it was like a Marvel Mantis fan fiction kind of storyline. And so we'll see a little portion of that later. I'm going to try one more time. Come on. Okay. Okay, so go to Eric Productions, CWVFF, How to Pitch a Big Story. You can catch those later. All right, so fortunately I've got some little local videos that we can use instead. So let's look at this script breakdown video right here. So we took a script, my friend Sharon and I, and pause. Give me the ability to pause. Took a script, and it was a coming-of-age story. It was me dealing with the fact that I'm highly sensitive and trying to figure out how to work through that. And so we took the script and we broke it down into this spreadsheet, which I also have on the resources page. And you kind of become the producer. You start wearing that producer hat when you're thinking in this way, when you're thinking like, okay, is this an interior, exterior scene? What's the dialogue? What environment props? There's some lines in the script where she's talking via comms with Drax and Quill, and they've walked off to another part of the planet. They're doing a supply run, and so it forces you to think, oh yeah, I need to add at least like a cube geometry on their ears at some point, because they're talking on comms, and I need to find a sci-fi market. And you can analyze, okay, what emotion do I want this scene to be in? And that's going to affect the choices that you make. And so there's a book called The Visual Story, I believe, by Bruce Block. And it just talks about how different elements are either contributing to heightening stress, or they are more peaceful and relaxing. Just different elements have a different connotation to them. Like diagonal lines are stronger and more action-oriented versus vertical or horizontal, or how much information and how much the camera is shaking. It's, if there's a high-action movie and the camera's doing this, you're going to be more tense than if it's just a locked-off shot. So this gives you a chance to think about the visual language ahead of time. And that's just something I enjoy as well. Okay. So thinking about, okay, do I want it to be a full shot, medium close-up, extreme close-up, low angle, high angle. There's different power dynamics with high or low angle. Okay. So first, we're in spreadsheet land. Kind of boring at first, but you're fixing things in pre. You're anticipating things in pre. And what we worked on, I worked on maybe for pieces of 3 or 4 days, and I'm also trying to document things for this presentation too, so just to give you perspective. And this talk today, it's not like, okay, how to make the best pitch deck, period. There are other resources online for that, but this talk is like how to incorporate Unreal in a pitch deck that has a log line and has a target audience in mind and has all those pieces together. Yeah, so just another reason to check out the visual story book, because whether you like it or not, you watch a movie, you're being manipulated, and it's because of those connotations of all those different elements. All right. But usually when you're writing a story and trying to pitch it, you are also trying to grab reference material. And people oftentimes make mood boards, and they're trying to figure out the tone or get lighting references. And so I typed in sci-fi market on Shot Deck, and it pulls images from a vast library of films. Pardon me. And so I was getting some images from Altered Carbon that popped up that looked interesting, that could match a reference image that we had. And there was a part of the story where Mantis grabs some fruit that actually sting her, and so she's reacting to that. And so I was curious if there was another shot somewhere that had a similar incident, and I was trying to see, okay, how did they frame that shot? I may not necessarily do it the same way, but I can at least click on it and get information like, oh, okay, it was a 50 millimeter lens. Look at the lighting. Or I was typing in, okay, overwhelming, because that was an emotion I wanted her to have, 'cause she was having a lot of stimulation at the beginning, and I still need to push that angle more. But you can see certain shots. I noticed there was a lot of motion blur in shots that had that emotion overwhelming tagged with it. This one, Market Sci-Fi Comedy, it brought up a Lilo and Stitch image. I'm like, okay. So you can get a lot of inspiration from something like this. There's other resources like Film Grab and Film AI that you don't have to pay monthly, but I'm using a 2-week subscription or free trial right now. And side note, if you become a student at CG Spectrum, you get a discount. So, ha ha ha. Let me see if there's anything useful at the end. What is ShotBank? It's a resource for filmmakers. It's usually used on the pitching side of things. And you, if you look at the images that I had sorted together, it's another way of doing a mood board rather than it just being on Pinterest or another bin. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to repeat, it finds those clips from movies, so you don't have to go scouring. I mean, there are some websites that actually rip every single frame, and then you have to click through a ton, and it's got a ton of advertisements, and it's way more convenient to just go on something like this. It's curated with emotion tags, the kind of shot it is tags, interior, exterior, things like that. It's got a lot of classics in there, so I think they have, like, for instance, I was looking at Marvel movies for my reference, and it had Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2, but I don't think it had 3 yet, and I don't think it had the Disney Christmas version. So. You said ShotBank costs money? A little bit, like $5 or $10 a month, but. Is there a free alternative? I would check out either Film Grab or Film AI, things like that. Yeah. Because if you want, you could use a PowerPoint for your mood board if you needed to. It doesn't necessarily have to live on ShotDeck. Cool. All right. So I'm going to see if I can at least get to the slide that has one reference image. See if I can get this image to at least load. Okay, so that's the ShotDeck video we did. Yep. Okay. So based on the script with Sharon, there was an image that she was like, oh, it might be nice if it looked like this. And if it doesn't come in, I'll just switch to the environment that I grabbed based off of it. Yeah, okay. I'll let it sit there, and then we can do this. There it goes. All right, so let me pause. So this is the Epic Games launcher that we're looking at. So usually if you're trying to download Unreal Engine for the first time, you start with the Epic Games launcher, and it's got a learning, it used to be called Learning tab, but now it's called Samples, and that's got projects that you can download and you can explore and reverse engineer to see how they did certain things. There's a marketplace, which is where I found this environment for the end product that you'll see. And then the library is where your projects live. And then Twinmotion is a software used for more architectural visualization of buildings and things like that. But this cyberpunk city, it was $40 on the marketplace, because I don't consider myself a modeler per se. That's not something I usually want to spend a ton of time on, but there's a need for it. If you want to get into modeling, you could use that for putting environments on the marketplace, or you could use that skill for building virtual art department, because let's say you're doing an LED wall production, and you've got elements on the wall and elements in front of the camera. Sometimes you need to make a digital double of that element that's in the foreground. And you could either do that from taking a lot of pictures of it and doing photogrammetry, and the pictures get stitched together to make that 3D model, or you could be ZBrushing something yourself, especially if it doesn't exist yet and it's sci-fi or something. So modeling is a great in if you don't know where to start. So I'm just adding this environment that I thought was close enough to the concept art to my project that I have. And this is my mantis metahuman that I made. I didn't add the antenna, but she's just got some general clothing and a green shirt. But this is the environment that I got. I did not spend tons and tons of time, but this is what I got for $40. So I've got plenty of things to play with in here. But you notice I hit the play button, and I wasn't having to render and wait for those pixels. I was moving around and exploring the scene in real time. So the question is, when you buy some of those models, what's the licensing? So if you buy something on the marketplace, once you buy it, you can use it in Unreal Engine. I don't think you're supposed to use it outside of Unreal Engine, but if you keep it within that platform. Yeah, they don't take money unless you make a certain threshold, and then they want to cut. The pricing model is adjusting, so I would double check that first because it's in transition, but yeah.
Could it possibly work with Blender, or is there a way to like model and animate characters yourselves in there, especially if the characters are like, how do I say it, non-human or kind of like armored or something?
It's very common to start in Blender and then bring those assets into Unreal, or you could do that via Maya. Oh. Yeah, definitely. So yes, you can definitely bring in things from those other softwares. They encourage it, actually. And here's the image that we were waiting on. So that was the concept art. So I figured it's close enough. This is just previs. If I needed to pitch for $1 million, maybe I would try to spend more time to make it closer, but it was a good enough communication tool. And then this was the yarrow root fruit that we have in our scene. So recap, the scene is the characters, they're on a supply run, and they're having dialogue, and they're at a fruit market, and eventually like she learns more about her identity. But a little bit about adding characters. There's some options. So this is a cloud-based, human-rigged character generator that Epic Games has that you can go online and decide, okay, do I want the person to look Asian or Mediterranean, or what kind of hair do I want them to have, or just the skin, or other things like that. And for just generic, normal human beings, this could work. But it's already rigged. You don't have to actually design how you're going to move the joints around. And it already does the difficult process of figuring out, okay, if your character has joints, how much influence do each of the vertices of the 3D mesh have from each of those joints? Because you don't want, like let's say you move the elbow or something, you don't want that to affect vertices over here. So that has to be put into a format that the software can understand. And that's something that it's very specialized. A lot of people hate doing it, and they've taken that part out of the equation, so you don't have to. But there's pros and cons to making your own environment, to buying something on the marketplace. For instance, the level that I bought, there was a feature that they used to make it that turned off other features that just affected some usability flow. So if you make it yourself, you have more control. But if you go buy it, time is money. So there's definitely still pros and cons there.
You said you paid $40 for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you had to make that, is that a week? Is that a day? What would that be?
Depends on how fast you are. Right, versus how much you could charge at an hourly rate versus how much you would have to spend making it.
I got a question. So in the industry, there's a stigma associated with getting assets on the marketplace. So like, do you feel like that is really a thing, or is that more of just elitists trying to gatekeep?
Okay, so the question is, there's a perceived stigma with purchasing assets from the marketplace. If you're trying to create a multi-million-dollar movie where you've got this big budget and you've got to justify it, and you have all these fancy vis effects artists who can do all that themselves, I think they would want to have bespoke, unique, custom assets where people were ZBrushing it, sculpting it digitally, and things like that. But I'm sure in a pinch they probably have, if they have a indoor scene and they needed to throw in a lamp or something where you couldn't tell, I'm sure they still do both. But there's a lot of companies with virtual art departments, so they have their own custom stuff that they made that they can say, hey, this is not just something we grabbed off the marketplace. But on the previs side, and you're just trying to communicate ideas, I would say fair game. Yeah, good question. Okay. So. So, question is, does this work with prompts? And what I'm showing you, I'm the one I went on the marketplace and I browsed things, and users submitted their content to be sold. So this is not AI where you're putting in a prompt and it's generating something, but maybe that's where we're going? Question mark, ...
Where do you think it's going?
I think so. There's probably going to be a combination. For instance, when motion capture came out, people were like, oh no, animators are going to lose their jobs. Are there still animators? Yes, there are. It's just people choose either one or the other or do a combination of both. It's just you use different things for different situations. So I'm sure there's going to be situations where you would use more AI and situations where you use a blender or not at all. So at this point, I've got my level, and I've added my character to my scene. And let me pause on. This is a metahuman character, and this is the default rig that comes with it. I did not set up those little rings that tell the joints and the vertices to move. That's all Epic Games. And What you see in the bottom half of the screen is the tool called Sequencer, which is the closest thing to a video editing software. It's like their equivalent of it. But the cool thing about a game engine is, let's say I decided I needed to change the shirt to not be green but pink. With video editing, you would have to go back to every single one of your shots that you rendered out and go back in and change it for each of those shots. But if you're still in your game engine and you have your different shots, the pink shirt, it will get updated in all of those shots because it's just referencing that level. So live updating is what I'm trying to describe. And you've got a camera cut track, and you can position things around. I spent way too much time on this fruit stand. Again, I mentioned I'm not. I don't consider myself a world builder, but the fruit I grabbed from Quixel. Quixel is a software that you can get to from within the engine, and it's a library of assets where people they traveled the country, they took tons of pictures, and then the pictures got stitched together to be turned into a 3D model, and it looks very photoreal. And I did not have to buy those. I brought them in, and then, again, not a modeler, but I looked at the level. I found different pieces I could use, like this thing that is the fruit basket up here. I think it was supposed to be a bridge or something in the level, but I scaled it down, and I'm like, hey, it's a fruit basket. You get the idea, kind of thing. But once you have your accurately sized character in your environment, it helps you make sure that your scale is correct. I realized, oh, this is actually too tall, so I'm adjusting it, moving it down. And so you can see there's a lot of keyframe controls on this rig. There's a lot of controls, so you oftentimes have to search for just hand, or so you're not sifting through too many dials at the same time. There's a simple version of the rig too, if you're curious. And then, I don't know if I have a video of this or not, but there's also a facial rig and a posing system. So if you took some time to make like an angry face and then you saved it, and then you took some time to make a surprised face, you could then just drop those in later. So I was trying to have some keyframes for her grabbing the fruit, but it had been a while since I'd done the keyframe animation thing. I like working on, there's a concept called retargeting, which is very technical, but essentially, let's say you have an animation that was made for this character, and then this character has a different bone structure and naming. Let's say this one has 4 spine joints and that one has 3. It's a process to help you make the animation work for not just the original, but any other kind of skeleton. So that's the kind of thing that I actually enjoy more. But here we go. Here's the facial control rig. So today's really about just showing process and possibilities. And I actually ended up using motion capture clips from a source called Mixamo. It's a company that Adobe bought, and they basically bought it to remove the competition because they haven't done anything with it. But you can find animation clips of, angry walk or just different reactions or something. So what I did, scroll right down. Sequencer, keyframe, Mantis mocap, that's the one. So I'm tweaking this scene. I think I'm trying to find a clip for, so the blue guy is Drax, The wood texture is quill. You don't always have to have a full metahuman. Just to show you, there's a variation in level of fidelity. So you could do a metahuman, but then you have to deal with maybe the physics of the hair. In retrospect, I probably would have used a simpler version of the hair. So you have to choose how fancy or not fancy do you want it to be. And I'm taking a mocap clip. The purple clips represent mocap data that I brought from Mixamo. And you can slice it and dice it and blend it and adjust the play rate, for instance. And I was trying to get some amount of motion, but I mean, he was doing this, and it was just too much. I just needed more on the face. So I slowed it down. All right. Mm-hmm. How advanced is the virtual camera? So you've got the ability to change the millimeter lens, so the focal length. You can change the size of the sensor, change that aspect ratio, depth of field, or definitely like the focus, how far. And there's even some anamorphic things, which is, I'd have to look more into that. Yeah. All right. Let me see if I can get this one to play, because this one's local. So this is just the current work in progress. Yeah, not final product, but work in progress.
How much RAM would you recommend for a device if you were really trying to get it?
I used to say either 8 or 16 gig, but my best answer is go to the documentation on the technical, because it's changing all the time. All right, I just am going to find the local version. Full screen. So it's just half a page of script. It's rules. Let me restart it. So it's just half a page, and I asked my boyfriend to help with the voice acting. So I'm the mantis at the end, and we've got Peter or Quill and Drax coming up with a grocery list, basically.
Don't forget the yarrow root from Ascalveria. You mean those spiky things that have octopus tentacles that sting? I hate those. They're my favorite. They tingle in my mouth. Okay, Drax. Got that, Mantis?
That's it. So, and as you can see, in hindsight, like the hair, if I had kept it simpler, there's just a concept in game engines of things needing time to warm up because of the physics interactions for it to like calm back down. But if I had rendered the shots out individually and then pulled things together in Premiere and then added the audio over there, there was a higher chance of me having less issues like that. But that's just an extra detail. But if you think back when I was telling you, okay, they're on a supply run and they're getting things, what did you visualize versus what you just saw? Was it different? Was it similar? Was it exactly? Did you envision it the same way that I did? And what I could do, like if I want to go back to my reference, I had more motion blur in there, so there's a point where you're just trying to get things in there and find shots that look okay. But then you can spend more time on, okay, let me get it to match the tone and the language that I want it to be so that I can not have a camera smacking into a wall, because there's those things to think about, but also supporting the mood and the story as well. So I'll run it one more time.
Don't forget the yarrow root from Ascalveria. You mean those spiky things that have octopus tentacles that sting? I hate those. They're my favorite. They tingle in my mouth. Okay, Drax. Got that, Mantis?
So, and you notice I just had her sliding across, and that for previs that's okay. But if I were giving $1 million pitch, I'd probably want to at least put a tiny walk cycle in or something. So you get to make those choices in terms of is it worth it to take it further. So I'm going to transition to some QA, and I'm going to see if I can get one of these videos to play. So I'm going to let it. That's okay. Thanks, George. All right. See, maybe a not full-size version works better.
Why use Unreal? From a writer's perspective, it helps answer the question, what if? We can basically go from mind's eye to the camera's eye instantaneously.
The great thing about Unreal is it brings your characters to life in a way that a script just could never do. But also you're creating something that exists, and not just for this movie, but for all time.
Filmmaking is an art form that has evolved with technology, and technology enables creative freedom. Working in Unreal Engine didn't just give me a tool, but it also gave me confidence in myself. As a screenwriter, I was admittedly intimidated by using Unreal Engine to start with. It's been used by visual effects experts. Where does a writer fit into this? Unreal Engine was originally developed as video game software, a game engine to build games. But what you're also able to do with Unreal Engine is build the cutscenes. And what you're essentially looking at before you place the cameras is your entire scene.
Entire scene. Okay, I'm gonna pause on that for a little bit. Questions?
I'm sorry, I came a bit late, but is the context, was that a Mantis project you were working on official, or is it like something you're pitching to something else, or something else?
Okay, so the question was the Mantis project something you're working on officially, or are you just trying to pitch? So I would consider it a script that a friend and I wrote just for my own personal desired development, and I would just call it a Mantis fan fiction that I decided to do a pitch-like creation for the sake of this conference.
So, as just like for any beginner level or someone who has no concept of animation or 3D modeling at all, how would you recommend like learning Unreal Engine or learning to other programs to use it with, like Blender and stuff?
Mm-hmm. So for someone who's not done any animation or modeling, like how would you recommend getting started? Part of it is just getting familiarized with the concepts of, okay, there's this thing called LED wall production, or I love to watch a lot of just behind the scenes kinds of content. You learn so much on those interviews, but more practically, which is I think what you're probably more interested in. For instance, there are like training parts. So Epic Games has offloaded some of its training to training centers that they have given like a gold star of approval. And they're all over the world. There are in-person opportunities, there are virtual opportunities. Also, I've got a sign-up sheet if anyone wants to get updates on if I'm doing any online Zoom sessions. I think it would be cool to just pick a beginner tutorial that Unreal has released and say, okay, let's pick this tutorial, and then have some amount of time for people to try and go through it and figure out where they got stuck and have their questions, and just help more people who want to share Jesus in this environment. So I would say sign up sheet. And I help mentor with CG Spectrum for some of their programs. I'm trying to help them with their content development. Final Pixel is another training center that has courses. If you're to a point where you're like, I do better if I have the discipline and structure of a school learning environment, but I don't know which one to choose, we can talk about that, because different people have different needs. If you want the most accelerated, advanced prep, and you're prepared in your soul to deal with not necessarily being with a ton of believers, there's certain ones I would recommend for that, but others are more welcoming of people with faith of various kinds, and they still have decent material, so there's a lot out there. Does that answer your question?
I think it does.
Okay. If not, we can.
I guess maybe to specify it a bit clearer is like, say you got Unreal Engine, or say you just got Blender or something, like how would you learn how to use the pieces to create what you have envisioned or what you hope to, I guess, play out in the program?
So to specify, if you wanted to move with Blender or Maya or those pieces, like how would you put the pieces together of what you have in your head?
Yeah, something like that. Kind of like a 101 on how to use the tools into what you're trying to create, basically.
Some people learn better by, okay, I have this idea, I want to move toward just making that, and just learning the pieces for what you're getting on screen. So maybe you just learn how to render and light and model, or at least find some models and things like that. But other people do better with, I need to at least learn the foundations and building blocks first, but there's so many tutorials out there to choose from. So I would actually recommend a combination of the two, of like both. Like you got to start with the kind of learning that you do is different if you start with building blocks versus if you're just learning for a certain type of project. And if we're lucky, there's an example of someone who had a story. So the logline for this film called Smoking Tigers, this person was also in the Writing and Unreal program. It's set in LA in early 2000s. Smoking Tigers is a portrait of a lonely 16-year-old Korean American girl named Ha-young, who is taken under the wings of 3 wealthy students she meets at an elite academic boot camp. As she falls deeper into their world, Ha-young works harder to hide her problematic family and lower income background to her new friends, only to discover the bittersweet pains of adulthood that will forever shape her life. Side note, I think this log line's a little on the long side, but it got her $1 million. In combination with this, let me see if I can get this video to play. And it's an example of a more polished previs. Let's see if I can just play it from within this one. All right, I just need to throw in the towel on that idea, but you guys know where to find it. But the camera motion as the girl was exploring inside the house, it was like choreographing a ballet dance with the camera, and they had the mocap precise, and the rhythm and the feel and the tone were all communicated really well because it was just all there in advance. But on the, so there's learning communities. I would say the Unreal Dev Community Learning Library is a great place to find, find a lot of tutorials that were made by trusted individuals. Some of it might be outdated because the software changes so rapidly, unfortunately. But the cool thing about the idea of what I want to do is like, okay, let's just pick a tutorial to go through. Even if it is outdated, I'm familiar enough with it to be able to say, oh, okay, that button moved from here to here. You actually just do this now. Okay. Other questions? Mm-hmm.
I haven't done pitches with the visual aids or anything, so when you do that, like, how much of it would you bring? Like a few minutes or a scene, or like, what would you use for a pitch?
Okay, so how much visual content would you use in a pitch? And for the writing in Unreal program, it was no more than 4 pages. It was choosing a very strong pivotal crux. Like, if people didn't get this part of the scene or the film, then, you know, why bother? So it was one of those pivotal moments, whether it's a key emotional moment or something that's difficult to express. Because if it's something that, you know, if it's just like 2 people talking in a coffee shop, just do what you normally do. But going to the pitching resources, the spreadsheet that I used for the script breakdown, that is in there. It's blank, so you can fill it in. Shot deck, as well as there's a tool called the pronunciation. It's this French tool, like it's made by Terriblis Studio. Anyway, the link is there. But I used that converter tool to bring the mocap clips and be able to apply it onto a metahuman, because the metahuman has a specific bone structure and the Mixamo character had a specific bone structure. But if you use the tool and the tutorial, it's pretty self-explanatory. You can be able to just grab those mocap clips without having to animate, keyframe every little bit. Yeah, how far is the clipboard along? Okay, all right, it's making its way along. Perfect. Mm-hmm.
So how much of the, so this is previs, how much of this would you think would actually get carried through the actual production process, and how much of it is like, no, this is just, you know, a rough, like we're not even using the same models or anything?
Right. Ideally, if you knew you were going to use LED wall for some of your shots for a live action, ideally the choices you would make in the previs would be a lot closer so that you could carry the assets all the way through the pipeline rather than having to, because a lot of the way we used to produce, you would throw it away a lot of assets. Like this company, VisFX shop would have assets, and then these people would try to recreate it, and there wouldn't be a lot of connectivity. It would just a lot of waste time. So, and you can have films, and then films sometimes they turn into TV shows, or they merchandise things. So if they had a character, they could then turn that into a little toy figure or something. So more people are realizing the value of choosing the correct assets early and then just pushing it all the way down.
Would you take a little bit more time on the previs side to get it right from that point?
Certainly.
That we're going to end up needing it later?
Like, let's say you knew it was going to look like a certain location in New York, for instance, and there was maybe it was a different time period, like the 1800s or something, so you couldn't just go shoot there. Then look up the schematics and, I don't know, either photogrammetry that or have someone model that, and then keep that for the rest of it. A question?
I guess I already see enough there, but can you like make your own visual effects? Like say you wanted your guy to shoot like energy plasma or fire out of his hands?
Oh yeah, that kind of thing is actually pretty, I'm not going to say free, but pretty easy. Like if you have a specific aesthetic with stylized plasma or something, you probably need some more time and effort, but if you don't really care as much about the shape of it, it's just like fire blob, yeah, no problem. Take advantage of the physics.
We have about 2 minutes left of time. We have 2 more questions. Is there how much level of polish would you typically put into something that would just be for a pitch or previs? Do you like just enough to get the idea across, or do you try to go as detailed in like the keyframes and all the metrics and stuff as possible?
It also depends with your client, because some clients, if they see something, they get so locked into it, and sometimes it's better to pull back so that, so for instance, when I was working at Trick 3D, this was, they were still using 3ds Max, so a different software to render out the animatic, which is like an earlier version of storyboards, and it's animated, but it's not previs yet. But they had to make it grayscale so that people weren't so attached to the textures, because that aspect, it wasn't final yet. And so to remove the confusion, they actually simplified things. But as people get used to the process, I'm sure you could push it further. But sometimes people are just doing T-pose, sliding around. Sometimes you're dropping in mocap clips. There's, for some reason, the motion of being scared and like running away is reused in like almost every film. At least at one previs studio, they were noticing like they needed that mocap clip every single time. But then there's you could just have a mannequin and no facial and just rely on the scratch voiceover, or you could actually put a little bit of facial in if you wanted to. There was one studio, they had facial in their previs, but they were already doing a ton of stunt work, and I'm thinking to myself, why are you adding more heartache when you're already doing this complicated? Just focus on they're gonna have a scrunched face if they get hit, but to each their own.
So that's basically all the time we have, guys. Give a round of applause to